Hello, my name is Cameron, and I've been asked to give a seminar presentation on our book, Artists and Markets in Music. Just a 15 or 20-minute presentation on the book by some cultural economists. And so I'll show you what I prepared. Okay, so this is my presentation, and it's about sussing out values, artistic values. Right. So what we did is this book published in August 2023, official publication date 2024, was during the COVID era, and we were looking at how artists were doing entrepreneurial pivots during the COVID era and how they were reacting and what their attitudes were towards the period. And then we also we did a survey, a snowball method survey, where we didn't use any prepaid lists or official statistics or anything. What we did is we sent out, the three of us, the authors, sent out on SurveyMonkey to people, musicians who we thought they would be interested in taking the survey, and then they would pass it on to others, and hopefully it would build up to a snowball to where we would get enough respondents to make some generalizations. So what we did is anyone who self-defined as a musician, so it's subjective values. Anyone who self-defined as a musician is a musician. And the questions in the survey were more ordinal than cardinal, meaning they were all relative questions instead of absolute questions. So we wanted to make it not quite like applying for insurance, where you had to fill out forms. It was more of a chance to be reflexive. So the socioeconomic production function for music is based on this production function, where the either quantity or quality, you could say, is a function of the capital, labor, serendipity, authenticity, and drugs. So Samuel Cameron, 2015 and 2016, proposes this production function for music. Okay, what is the production function for music? Capital includes the technology. It's from her book. Capital includes the technology present at a given time, including the natural resources of artist or collective talent. The production is also limited by the recording and performance technology at a given time and place. Labor is measured by effort units, not as time in orthodox economic measurement. Here we might suggest instead quality of concentration units as to better capture the creative process. Serendipity can be applicable to both supply and demand. Artists create their own demand through entrepreneurship. Some entrepreneur success may be blind luck through the market discovery process. Mick Jagger has said that, being English, he believes the reason the Rolling Stones have had such great success is because they are lucky. There may be serendipity in the production process, as well as mistakes that turn productive. Miles Davis is famous for recording his improvisations in order to capture the unique. So serendipity might also represent tacit knowledge and action towards risk-taking and entrepreneurial reward. For those on the spiritual side, serendipity may also represent the divine intervention, of which many artists speak when describing their inspiration. Authenticity is also, of course, tacit knowledge and practice. It may be indefinable and related to Kantian notions of the sublime and Max Weber's charisma, as discussed in the previous chapter. Cameron 2015 claims that as a fallacy to believe that the originality only comes from the noble savage outside the stuffy confines of formal linear music training. The truth may lie somewhere in between and is realized through the specialization of labor. Drugs can either be a form of capital as input to the creative process, or they may be an occupational hazard that has become ritualized and institutionalized. The truth, again, is probably somewhere in between. The choice of stimulants or none at all can be a means to connect audience and artists. Stimulants can also help with performance, much like cocaine in the Great War, Speed with Johnny Cash and Motorhead, Red Stripe Beer with early 1960s ska, and cannabis as a sacrament to the later Rastafarian reggae musicians. Drugs can also be a proxy for madness or the tortured artist, or in the case of Beethoven, Django Reinhardt, Brian Wilson, Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Jerry Garcia, Tony Iommi, and Kurt Cobain, actual physical liability. And we have to keep in mind that capital labor, serendipity, authenticity, and stimulants or drugs are again subjective measures, implicit and tacit. So they're so Cameron's doing this kind of tongue in cheek because you can't really measure these things, and that's the neoclassical economic production function, which Anwar Sheikh calls it the humbug production function, because you can't really measure it unless you make so many assumptions that it becomes meaningless. Anyway, we use this as an exploration for subjectivity instead of an overtly objective production function. The first question we ask is, how long have you considered yourself a musician? So only those that answered more than 0 years is then able to take the survey, or do we look at their results? And the second question is, do you think formal education is important in the success of a musical artist? Do you think formal education is important? And then we also ask, do you think serendipity is important? Do you think authenticity? Do you think copyright protection, gender identity, entrepreneurship, and English language ability? How important are these in the success of a musical artist? And we never define what success is. So it's sussing out people's values, their own values. And then, so that's serendipity and authenticity. And then the stimulant part, do you use stimulants, tea, coffee, marijuana, wine, liquor, etc., as part of the creative process? We didn't find any correlation between the level of stimulus use and length of time as a musician. So this might be to, in other words, the use of stimulants could be an occupational hazard. But because we didn't find any correlation between stimulus use and length of time as a musician, this could be due to survivor selection bias, or that use is actually part of the creative process and not an occupational hazard. So do you think serendipity plays a success for a musical artist? Do you think authenticity and the subjective importance of drugs in the creative process? And you'll see that a vast majority agree with the authenticity, serendipity, and more than 75% say that they do use stimulants as part of the creative process. So this does not refute the sad production function for music, and that these musicians do agree with the values that Cameron lays out here. And then also we looked at during the COVID era, how do values relate to practice? How have you been doing creatively during the last 2 years of the COVID era? And how have you been doing economically, better or worse than before? And again, the survey is open during this lockdown period. So what's interesting here is those that value serendipity more than everyone else are doing worse creatively, meaning they don't have the chance to engage in the market process and be entrepreneurially aware and luckily engage in success. So those who value serendipity more are doing worse creatively during the COVID era. And strangely enough, those who value drugs during the COVID era are doing better than those who don't. So they might be used to more uncertain environments anyway. And then also an additional interesting finding is that people who are members of unions are doing much worse economically during the COVID era. And now we're looking at, did I receive grants, private grants for the arts during the COVID era? Did I receive government relief money during the COVID era? And then you can see that those respondents believing that education is important, music education is important to success in music, receive more government relief money during the COVID era. So that would tell you that social capital, that education builds, or that education builds social capital, cultural capital, and better connections, and therefore better able to get grants, both private and through the state. And you'll see that if labor union members, only 15% of labor union members believe that education is important to success as a musician, and only 17% believe that entrepreneurship is important to success, where non-labor union members are in the majority of believing that those are important to success. Another question that cultural economics are interested in is the relationship between education, between arts education and income. And what we found, we didn't ask if people had what level of education, we just asked them, value-based, do they believe that education is important to success as a musician? And those declaring that education is not important make more money than those who declare education is important. And we'll see that non-music income for those who don't believe education is important is actually a greater percentage than those who declare education is important. So this is musicians who value education more earn less both in music and non-music income. So this is consistent with Bourdieu's idea of distinction in cultural capital. It's not about income which brings distinction, and rather education. Okay, and then the last question we asked, or we're talking about here, is how much do you agree with this statement? Good art can come from bad times. And you'll see that most respondents believe that good art can come from bad times. Right. So I like the example of the Soviet Union and the great art, Shostakovich music from that period. But those who find union membership is extremely or very important for success, 12% strongly disagree that good art can come from bad times. We also found that those valuing labor union membership are less likely to collaborate with others, and also believe that English language ability is more important in the success of a musician than those who aren't labor union members. Okay, so here's the references. Thank you for listening.